As we continue our journey of this nature-nurture debate and looking at what's shaping John and what's influencing him, that's causing him to grow up to be strong in the spirit, we see that he's influenced by a number of things. We've seen that he's been influenced by the power of parenting. We've seen that he's been influenced by that presence of partnership, that sense of being connected to the Holy Spirit. We see that he's been influenced by the culture around him and the corrupt nature of that. And we're also seeing that there's this other influence where he is called to be a prophet in the spirit and strength of Elijah. And he's growing up in Ein Karim, in the spring of the vineyard, in a region that's called the Bordeaux of ancient times, surrounded by vineyards, but himself not being allowed to touch a drop. I believe all these influences shape him, and as a result of this, he's seeing with the eyes of the prophet. And growing up in Ein Karim, not only is he seeing the vineyards, and prophetically that's speaking into his soul, we see that he's also looking at the sense of growing up in the spring of the vineyard, where spring is called to be fertile, but it allows an area to be fruitful when it's connected to the spring. We see that the spring offers hope, and that when things are tough we can be connected to the source of refreshment and have our souls refreshed in a dry and parched land. It offers hope. But I believe there's a third aspect to springs that allows John to develop something of his message and to develop that sense of seeing with the eyes of the prophet. And that is that springs are a permanent source of water. And in that they're a picture of God's presence being a permanent, eternal presence. In our story, and what we're going to see as we journey on in our story, is that having become strong in the Spirit, John's next step is to go into the wilderness. And if you're ever going to go into a wilderness, and there's much we can learn from wilderness experiences, we have to learn how to survive in a wilderness. And for John to take the next step on his journey to fulfilling his role as the hero, he has to understand how to find survival in a wilderness. Water is often described as the elixir of life, and it's an essential means to life. And when you go into a wilderness, as we will learn as we look over the next sessions, we'll see that there are different types of sources of water that we can access. But springs are a symbol of hope, they're a symbol of fertility, they're a symbol of the richness of God's promise, but they're also a symbol of the permanent nature of what God is offering. Springs are permanent sources of water in a dry and barren place. We know that springs are also a symbol of the presence of God. In Exodus 17, where the Israelites are travelling through the wilderness, and as the Israelites do time and time again, they find themselves grumbling. They experience a miracle and then they go, God, it's not good enough. There's a sense of constantly never ever being satisfied. And there's people of God constantly grumbling and constantly complaining and constantly saying that there's, Moses, why did you bring us into the wilderness? God doesn't care about us. He might have provided for us last week, but this is a new week, and so God, where's God this week? And there's all that moaning and groaning and grumbling, and it's no wonder that Moses' patience was tested and God's patience was tested with the Israelites, as we can see when we look through some of the accounts. But in Exodus 17, we see after one of these periods of grumbling, God speaks to Moses at a rock called Horeb and tells him to strike the rock. And as Moses strikes the rock, water gushes out. There's a spring of living water that flows out of the rock. Out of something that seems impossible, God provides for his people. And he gives this message that although the going might be tough, he's not abandoned them. A message that maybe we need to hear. And you and I are no different. We've done the same thing. And the invitation that we see to be connected to the spring is to rediscover that sense of being connected to the permanent source of living water, Emmanuel. Are you connected to God's people? Are you connected to his church? Are you connected to Emmanuel? Or are you trying to go it your own way?